The year is 1966, and London pulses with a new rhythm. Carnaby Street blazes with neon signs reflecting off rain-soaked cobblestones, while traditional Georgian townhouses stand like disapproving sentries against the tide of change. Two worlds collide in this electric city. The old guard clinging to proper tea times and pressed suits, and the young rebels racing through narrow alleys on chrome Vespa scooters, their Union Jack jackets flapping like rebellious flags. In the heart of Mayfair, where money speaks in whispers and tradition reigns supreme, stands the imposing Capulet mansion. Its windows gleam like watchful eyes behind wrought iron bars, and inside, crystal chandeliers cast shadows over Persian rugs and oil paintings of stern ancestors. Lord Capulet adjusts his gold pocket watch, his silver hair perfectly groomed, his three-piece suit a monument to unchanging values. The walls echo with classical violin music. Vivaldi, perhaps, or Bach. Something proper. Something that speaks of centuries of breeding and respectability. But just across the Thames, in the bohemian chaos of Chelsea, the Montague household thrums with electric guitars and the rebellious beat of the Kinks. Here, mod fashion explodes in geometric patterns across op-art wallpaper. Young people gather around a massive wireless radio, their haircuts sharp and angular, the boys in slim-fitting suits with narrow lapels, the girls in miniskirts that would make their mothers faint. Lord Montague himself has embraced the changing times, his sideburns grown fashionably long, his tie narrow and bold, his record collection featuring everything from the Rolling Stones to The Who. The feud between these families runs deeper than mere fashion choices. It's generational warfare played out on London's streets, where tradition battles innovation, where the establishment faces its greatest challenge yet. Youth with purchasing power and a voice that demands to be heard. Lady Capulet, draped in pearls and disappointment, speaks of the Montagues as if they were a disease spreading through proper society. They've forgotten what it means to be English, she declares over afternoon tea, her voice sharp enough to cut crystal. All this noise, this vulgarity. In my day, young people respected their elders. Meanwhile, in a Chelsea coffeehouse thick with cigarette smoke and heated debate, young Montagues and their friends plot their next move in this cultural revolution. The air crackles with talk of music, art, and freedom. Freedom from the suffocating expectations of their parents' generation. Freedom to love whom they choose, to dress how they please, to live life at full volume. The streets of London become their battlefield. Scuffles break out between the traditional young men in their fathers' clubs and the mod youth with their sharp haircuts and Italian suits. Police constables in their tall helmets try to maintain order, as these two worlds clash with increasing frequency. Shop windows display both tweed jackets and psychedelic shirts, as if the city itself can't decide which direction to face. On this particular foggy evening, as Big Ben chimes 9 times across the Thames, both families prepare for what will become a fateful encounter. The Capulets are hosting their traditional monthly soiree, an elegant affair with string quartets, champagne and proper flutes, and conversation that never rises above a murmur. Ladies in conservative evening gowns glide across polished floors while gentlemen discuss business and politics in measured tones. But tonight, something different stirs in the London air. Perhaps it's the music drifting from the King's Road clubs, or the electric energy of youth that refuses to be contained by drawing room etiquette. Change is coming, and not even the most proper Georgian mansion can keep it at bay forever. Through the narrow streets of Chelsea, a figure emerges from the purple haze of a dimly lit club. Romeo Montague steps into the London night, his silhouette cutting a sharp line against the neon glow of boutique windows. His hair falls in perfect mod waves across his forehead, and his Italian-cut suit, midnight blue with razor-thin lapels, fits him like it was sewn by Savile Row tailors with a rebellious streak. But tonight, despite the pulsing beat still echoing from the club behind him, Romeo's eyes hold a melancholy that even the swinging 60s cannot cure. "Love," he sighs to his companion Benvolio, who emerges beside him adjusting his own fashionably narrow tie. "What is this thing we call love, Ben? I've danced with every bird from Piccadilly to Portobello, and still I feel empty as a broken record player." Benvolio, ever the pragmatist in his sharp check jacket and Chelsea boots, lights a cigarette with a silver Zippo that catches the streetlight. "You're too dramatic, Romeo. Love isn't some cosmic mystery. It's simple chemistry, like mixing the perfect cocktail. You just haven't found your proper ingredient yet." The two young men walk through streets that seem to shift between centuries with each step. Victorian lampposts cast amber pools of light on modern shop windows, displaying the latest from Mary Quant and Biba. A red double-decker bus rumbles past, its headlights cutting through the fog, while somewhere in the distance, the Beatles' Yesterday drifts from an open window, mixing with the classical piano scales being practiced in a nearby townhouse. Meanwhile, in the Grand Capulet mansion, preparation for the evening soiree reaches fever pitch. Staff in traditional black and white uniforms polish silver and arrange white lilies in crystal vases, while Lady Capulet inspects every detail with the precision of a military commander. The house itself seems to exhale propriety, mahogany panels gleaming under chandelier light, oil paintings of stern ancestors watching disapprovingly from gilded frames, and Persian rugs so pristine they've probably never felt the weight of anything less than handmade Oxford shoes. Upstairs, in a bedroom that looks like it belongs to a Victorian princess, young Juliet Capulet sits before an ornate vanity mirror, but her reflection tells a different story. While her room is all pastels and propriety, Juliet herself radiates something far more modern. Her dark hair, instead of being properly pinned, falls in soft waves that frame a face both beautiful and intelligent. Her eyes hold a spark of curiosity that no amount of proper breeding can dim. "Tell me, nurse," Juliet says to the elderly woman fussing with her hair, "what's it like beyond these walls? I hear music sometimes. Different music. Coming from across the river. It sounds alive." The nurse, round and warm like fresh bread, clucks her tongue disapprovingly. "Child, you mustn't fill your head with such nonsense. That's not music. It's noise. Made by people who've forgotten their place. Your dear mother has arranged everything perfectly for tonight. Young Count Paris will be here. Such a proper gentleman." And, proper, Juliet interrupts, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. Everything must be proper, mustn't it? Proper dress, proper conversation, proper thoughts. But what if I don't want to be proper? What if I want to be real? Through her bedroom window, Juliet can see the lights of London spread out like fallen stars. Somewhere out there, young people are dancing to music that makes their hearts race, wearing clothes that express their souls rather than their social standing, falling in love because they choose to, not because it's been arranged over tea and biscuits. Back on the streets, Romeo and Benvolio encounter their friend Mercutio near Covent Garden. Mercutio is pure 1,960 seconds energy personified. His suit a bold check pattern, his shirt open at the collar, his hair longer than his parents would approve. He carries himself with the swagger of someone who's never met a convention he wouldn't challenge. "Romeo, my melodramatic mate!" Mercutio calls out, his voice carrying the slight working-class accent he refuses to hide despite his family's money. Still mooning about like some lovesick crooner? The night is young, London is electric, and somewhere out there are birds just waiting to meet a handsome mod like yourself. "But where, Mercutio?" Romeo asks, his voice carrying genuine longing. "Where does one find truth in a world full of facades? Where does one find real love in a city obsessed with image?" Mercutio grins, pulling out a cream-colored invitation from his jacket pocket. The paper itself seems to glow under the streetlight, embossed with the Capulet coat of arms. "Funny you should ask, Romeo. It seems the universe has provided an answer. Old Capulet is throwing one of his legendary parties tonight. All of London's finest families will be there. And lucky for us, I've managed to acquire invitations." Benvolio raises an eyebrow. "The Capulets? Romeo, you know what your father would say about attending a Capulet gathering. The bad blood between our families is exactly why we should go," Mercutio interrupts, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "What better way to thumb our noses at their stuffiness than to crash their party in style? Besides, Romeo needs a distraction from his romantic melancholy, and I need entertainment. It's perfect." Romeo stares at the invitation, something stirring in his chest. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Perhaps tonight, in the least likely place, he might find what he's been searching for. Perhaps love, real love, waits for him behind the proper facade of the Capulet mansion. The fog swirls around them as the three young men make their decision, while across the city, Juliet prepares for a party that will change everything. London holds its breath, as if the city itself knows that tonight, tradition and rebellion will dance together, and in that dance, two hearts will find each other across an impossible divide. The Capulet mansion blazes with golden light against the London fog, its Georgian windows glowing like beacons of old-world elegance. Black Bentleys and Rolls-Royces line the cobblestone drive, their chrome bumpers reflecting the warm glow spilling from crystal chandeliers within. Doormen in pristine white gloves and tailcoats usher guests through towering oak doors, while the sweet strains of a string quartet drift across manicured gardens, where topiaries stand at attention like green soldiers guarding tradition itself. Inside, the grand ballroom has been transformed into a shrine to propriety. White roses cascade from silver urns, their petals scattered across marble floors that reflect the soft light of dozens of candles. Ladies in conservative evening gowns, floor-length affairs in muted pastels, glide gracefully between gentlemen in traditional black tie, their conversations, a gentle murmur punctuated by the delicate clink of champagne flutes, and proper laughter that never rises above a dignified chuckle. Juliet descends the grand staircase like a vision caught between two worlds. Her gown, chosen by her mother, speaks of tradition. Pale ivory silk, with pearl buttons climbing to a modest neckline. But something in the way she moves, the slight defiance in her step, the way her eyes scan the room with intelligent curiosity rather than demure submission, suggests a spirit that cannot be contained by even the finest couture. Her dark hair, despite the nurse's efforts to pin it properly, has already begun to escape its constraints, framing her face with rebellious tendrils. "There she is," whispers Lady Capulet to her husband, both of them resplendent in their formal attire, she dripping with family pearls, he distinguished in his perfectly pressed tailcoat. "Our daughter, the very picture of English refinement. Count Paris has been asking about her all evening." Indeed, Count Paris stands near the champagne fountain, a figure of conventional handsomeness in his immaculate evening wear. His hair is properly pomaded, his posture perfect, his conversation focused on appropriate topics like the weather, his family's investments, and the disturbing influence of modern music on today's youth. He represents everything the Capulets value: stability, tradition, and a complete absence of surprise. But outside, threading through the London fog like phantoms of the future, three young men approach the mansion with very different intentions. Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio have transformed themselves for the evening, but their version of formal wear speaks a different language entirely. Their dinner jackets are cut closer to the body, their bow ties narrower, their hair deliberately tousled in a way that would make their hosts unconsciously touch their own perfectly groomed locks. They move with the confident swagger of youth that believes the future belongs to them. "Remember," Benvolio whispers as they approach the grand entrance, "we're supposed to be Mercutio's cousins from Yorkshire. Keep the family history vague and the accents posh." Mercutio grins, adjusting his cufflinks with theatrical flair. "Relax, Ben. The secret to crashing a proper party is to act like you belong there more than anyone else. Watch and learn." They sweep past the doormen with such confidence that no one thinks to question their presence. Inside, the contrast between their energy and the room's controlled atmosphere is immediate and electric. While other guests move with measured steps and speak in modulated tones, these three bring something wild and unpredictable into the carefully orchestrated evening. Romeo pauses just inside the ballroom, his eyes adjusting to the golden light, when suddenly the world shifts on its axis. Across the room, near a window where moonlight mingles with candlelight, stands a girl who seems to glow with her own inner light. Juliet, unaware that her life is about to change forever, stands listening politely to Count Paris. But her eyes wander toward the windows, toward the world beyond these perfect walls. "Who is she?" Romeo breathes, the question barely audible above the string quartet's gentle melody. Benvolio follows his gaze and immediately recognizes the danger. "Romeo, that's Juliet Capulet. You know who she is. You know what her name means. Come away from this madness before it starts." But Romeo is already moving, drawn across the ballroom floor, as if pulled by invisible strings. The crowd seems to part before him, and the music, was it always this beautiful? Seems to swell and shift, taking on a quality that speaks directly to his heart. He navigates between couples waltzing in perfect formation, past elderly gentlemen discussing politics, around ladies comparing their children's accomplishments, all of it fading into meaningless background noise. Juliet becomes aware of his approach before she sees him. Something changes in the air around her, a subtle shift in energy that makes her skin tingle and her heart quicken. She turns, and their eyes meet across the space of a few feet that might as well be an ocean or the width of a breath. Time stops. The London fog outside seems to press against the windows, like curious spirits wanting to witness this moment. The champagne bubbles in crystal glasses pause in their endless dance. Even the string quartet's music seems to hold a single perfect note that encompasses all the longing and possibility in the world. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced," Romeo says, his voice carrying just a hint of his mod background despite his efforts to sound properly posh. Though something tells me proper introductions are vastly overrated. Juliet's response surprises even herself. Instead of the demure courtesy her mother has drilled into her, she finds herself smiling with genuine warmth. Perhaps they are. Perhaps there are more important things than knowing someone's family name and social connections. Such as? Romeo asks, stepping closer, close enough now that she can see the intelligence in his dark eyes, the way his bow tie sits just slightly askew, the small rebellion of hair that refuses to stay properly combed. Such as whether they prefer the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, Juliet says, then immediately covers her mouth in shock at her own boldness. "I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. That was most improper." Romeo's laugh is warm and genuine, nothing like the polite chuckles echoing through the ballroom. Improper? That was the most honest thing anyone has said in this room all evening. And for the record, it depends on my mood. The Beatles when I'm feeling hopeful, the Stones when I'm feeling rebellious. "And tonight?" Juliet asks, surprising herself again with her directness. Romeo's eyes grow serious, though they never leave her face. "Tonight I'm feeling transformed." Around them, the party continues its elegant dance, but they exist now in a bubble of their own creation. They talk of music and dreams, of the changing world beyond these walls, of books they've read, and places they'd like to see. With every word, every shared glance, every moment of laughter, they fall deeper into something neither fully understands but both recognize as truth. But across the room, sharp eyes have noticed their connection. Tybalt Capulet, Juliet's cousin, stands rigid in his perfect evening wear, his jaw clenched with fury. Unlike the older generation, Tybalt recognizes Romeo immediately. They've clashed before in the streets of London, mod against tradition, new world against old. "That Montague devil," Tybalt hisses to his companion, his hand instinctively moving toward his jacket pocket where a switchblade rests against his ribs. "How dare he show his face in our house, speaking to our Juliet like she's some common Chelsea girl." The evening hangs in perfect, dangerous balance. Love blooms in one corner of the ballroom while hatred simmers in another. London fog presses against the windows like destiny itself, waiting to see which force will prove stronger. The ancient feud that divides two families, or the new love that seeks to unite two hearts. Romeo and Juliet continue their dance of words and glances, unaware that they stand at the center of a storm that will reshape not only their own lives, but the very fabric of two families caught between the dying world of tradition and the vibrant, dangerous promise of change. The London dawn breaks gray and hesitant over the Capulet mansion, its Georgian windows now dark and silent after the night's festivities. Empty champagne bottles and scattered white rose petals bear witness to the evening that changed everything, while milk floats rattle down cobblestone streets and early commuters hurry toward the underground, their umbrellas already raised against the perpetual threat of London drizzle. But Romeo Montague has not slept. He walks the empty streets of Chelsea like a man possessed, his evening clothes disheveled, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck, his usually perfect mod hair falling across his eyes in dark waves. The party ended hours ago, yet he cannot shake the image of Juliet's face, the sound of her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she confessed her secret love for the Beatles yesterday, a song her mother would consider far too common for a proper young lady. "Juliet," he whispers to the fog-wrapped streets, her name a prayer on his lips. "What light through yonder window breaks?" It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. His footsteps echo against wet pavement as he finds himself drawn back toward Mayfair, toward the imposing walls of the Capulet estate. Reason tells him this is madness. He is a Montague, she is a Capulet, and their family's hatred runs deeper than the Thames. But his heart, that rebellious organ that refuses to acknowledge social boundaries or family feuds, pulls him forward like a magnet draws iron. Meanwhile, in her ivory tower bedroom, Juliet sits by her window overlooking the private garden. Still wearing her party gown but with her hair finally freed from its pins, cascading around her shoulders in dark waves that would horrify her mother. She cannot explain what happened tonight, cannot rationalize the electric connection she felt with the mysterious young man whose name she learned only as the evening ended. Romeo Montague. Her family's sworn enemy, the boy she should despise, but instead cannot stop thinking about. Romeo, Romeo. Wherefore art thou, Romeo? She whispers to the pre-dawn darkness, her breath fogging the cold window glass. Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. The garden below lies in shadow, its carefully manicured hedges and classical statuary standing like silent sentries in the gray light. But as Juliet watches, a figure emerges from the fog, tall, lean, moving with the confident grace of youth. Her heart stops as she recognizes Romeo's silhouette, his mod-cut jacket unmistakable even in the dim light. Romeo has scaled the garden wall with the desperate agility of love, his Italian leather shoes finding purchase on ancient ivy that has grown thick against the Georgian brick. The garden, designed as a sanctuary of English propriety with its geometric flower beds and marble fountain, now becomes the stage for something wild and unprecedented. A love that defies every rule of their structured world. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? Romeo calls softly, his voice carrying across the garden like a modern troubadour's song. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Juliet's heart races as she leans out the window, her conservative nightgown replaced by a simple white slip that seems to glow in the early morning light. Romeo, how did you find me? And how, being found, did you dare climb these walls? Love's wings lifted me above these stones, Romeo replies, moving closer until he stands directly beneath her window, his upturned face serious and beautiful in the gray light. No wall can hold love out, and what love can do, love dares attempt. Your family's hatred cannot reach me here. If they discover you here, they'll kill you. Juliet whispers urgently, glancing back toward her bedroom door as if expecting her father to burst through at any moment. My cousin Tybalt recognized you at the party. He was furious that you dared show your face in our house. Romeo spreads his arms wide, his gesture encompassing both defiance and surrender. I have night's cloak to hide me from their eyes, and if you love me not, let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than death prolonged. Wanting of your love. The fog swirls around them like a living thing, muffling the sounds of awakening London, the distant rumble of early buses, the clip-clop of milk horses, the whistle of the Thames steamers beginning their daily runs. In this private world of garden and window, tradition and rebellion meet in perfect, impossible harmony. Do you love me? Juliet asks, the question hanging between them like morning mist. I know you'll say yes, but please, be truthful. Don't swear by the changeable moon, or by anything that might prove false. If you truly love me, tell me faithfully. Romeo's answer comes without hesitation, his voice carrying the conviction of absolute truth. Lady, by yonder blessed moon I vow, that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops. Don't swear by the moon, Juliet interrupts, her voice urgent with something between fear and hope. The moon changes constantly. I don't want your love to prove as variable. Swear by something constant, something real. Then by myself I swear, who am the truest thing I know, Romeo says, his hand pressed against his heart. I love you with every beat of this heart, every breath in my lungs, every thought in my head. I loved you from the moment I saw you across that ballroom. And I'll love you until Big Ben stops chiming, and the Thames runs dry. Above them, London pigeons begin their morning chorus, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chime 6 o'clock. The city stirs to life around their private declaration, but they exist in a bubble of their own creation, where family names don't matter and love writes its own rules. Then I believe you, Juliet whispers, her voice carrying across the garden like a promise. And I'll tell you a secret. Romeo Montague. I've been waiting all my life for someone like you. Someone real and honest and brave enough to climb impossible walls. What shall we do? Romeo asks, the practical question that must follow every declaration of impossible love. Our families will never accept this. Your parents have already chosen Count Paris as your husband. Juliet's face hardens with determination that would surprise anyone who knows her only as the dutiful Capulet daughter. Then we'll have to choose ourselves. If you're willing to take that risk, to defy everything we've been taught about duty and obedience, Then meet me tomorrow. There's a small chapel in Bloomsbury, far from both our neighborhoods. Father Mackenzie there is, progressive. He believes in love over arrangement. Tomorrow, Romeo's heart leaps at the possibility, even as his mind reels at the audacity of what they're contemplating. Tomorrow at noon, Juliet confirms, her voice steady despite the revolutionary nature of her words. If you mean what you say about love, then we'll make it official before God and conscience. No matter what our families think. The fog begins to lift as London awakens fully, and with it comes the return of reality. Soon, servants will be moving through the Capulet house, and Juliet's absence from her room will be discovered. Romeo must go, but neither wants to break this perfect, impossible moment. Until tomorrow then, Romeo says, backing away toward the garden wall, his eyes never leaving her face. And every moment until then will feel like a lifetime. Every moment, Juliet agrees, watching as he scales the ivy-covered wall with the same desperate grace that brought him to her. Romeo, be careful. The world isn't ready for love like ours. Then we'll teach it to be ready. Romeo calls softly as he disappears into the London fog, leaving only the scent of morning roses and the promise of revolution hanging in the air. Juliet remains at her window long after he's gone, watching the sun rise over a London that suddenly seems full of infinite possibility. Tomorrow, she will cease to be merely the dutiful Capulet daughter. Tomorrow, she will become something unprecedented. A woman who chooses her own destiny, who writes her own love story, who dares to believe that the future belongs to those brave enough to seize it. The morning fog clings to Bloomsbury's narrow streets like cigarette smoke in a jazz club, wrapping around Victorian terraces and Georgian squares, where writers and artists have made their homes alongside working-class families who've lived here for generations. Romeo moves through these bohemian streets with purpose, his evening clothes from the night before now rumpled and damp, drawing curious glances from early commuters heading to the underground. His destination, a small progressive chapel tucked between a used bookstore and a cafe where poets gather to read their works to sparse but passionate audiences. Father Mackenzie, a man in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles and silver hair that suggests both wisdom and a hint of rebellion, tends to his small garden behind St. Margaret's Chapel. Unlike the grand cathedrals of central London with their imposing spires and formal ceremonies, this humble building speaks of inclusion rather than exclusion, of love over law. The priest himself wears simple black robes, but his collar is loosened, and his sleeves are rolled up as he works among roses that bloom despite London's persistent gray skies. Father Mackenzie, Romeo calls softly, approaching through a wrought iron gate that squeaks on ancient hinges. I come to you in desperate need of guidance. The priest looks up from his roses, taking in Romeo's disheveled appearance, the wild look in his eyes, the way his hands shake slightly as he speaks. My son, you look as though you've wrestled with angels all night. Come, sit with me on this bench, and tell me what weighs so heavily on your soul. They sit together in the small garden, where morning glory vines climb wooden trellises and sparrows chirp from hidden nests. The sounds of London, distant traffic, the rumble of double-decker buses, the chatter of people heading to work, seem muffled here, as if this tiny sanctuary exists slightly outside the normal flow of time. Father, I've met the woman I want to marry. Romeo begins, his words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. I know how that sounds. We've known each other less than 12 hours, but I swear to you, I've never felt anything like this before. She's intelligent, beautiful, brave. She's everything I've been searching for without knowing I was searching. Father Mackenzie nods thoughtfully, his fingers steepled before him. Love at first sight is not uncommon, my son, though it's often confused with infatuation. Tell me about this young woman. Does she return your feelings? She does, Romeo says, his face lighting up with remembered joy. We talked all evening at a party. About music and books and dreams. She's not like the other girls in London society. She thinks for herself, questions everything, wants more from life than just a proper marriage and social climbing. And what is her name? The priest asks gently. Romeo's face falls, and he looks away toward the roses, their red petals bright against the gray morning. That's where it becomes complicated, Father. Her name is Juliet. Juliet Capulet. Father Mackenzie's eyebrows rise, and he leans back against the wooden bench. Ah, I see. The Capulets of Mayfair. Traditional as tea and biscuits, proper as pressed flowers. And you, I assume from your clothing and bearing, are Romeo Montague. Romeo confirms miserably. From Chelsea, from the family that represents everything the Capulets despise about modern London. Our families have been feuding for years over business, over politics, over the very direction this city should take. The priest is quiet for a long moment, watching a robin hop between rose bushes, its red breast bright as a tiny flame. When he speaks, his voice carries both understanding and concern. Young love is a powerful force, Romeo, but family hatred is equally strong. Have you considered the consequences of what you're asking? A marriage between a Montague and a Capulet would be seen as betrayal by both sides. Which is exactly why it might be the only thing that can heal this senseless divide, Romeo argues, his voice gaining strength. Father, our families are fighting over nothing more than pride and tradition. Meanwhile, the world is changing around them. The Beatles are singing about love. Young people are demanding the right to choose their own paths. And here we are, still trapped by feuds that began before we were born. Meanwhile, across London in the Capulet mansion, Juliet paces her bedroom like a caged songbird, her mind racing with the magnitude of what she's planning. The house buzzes with normal morning activity, servants polishing silver, her mother reviewing menus with the cook, her father reading the Times in his study while classical music plays softly from his wireless. Everything appears perfectly normal, yet Juliet feels as though the very walls might shatter from the force of her secret. A soft knock interrupts her thoughts, and her nurse enters carrying a breakfast tray. Delicate china painted with roses, proper English breakfast tea in a silver pot, and toast cut into perfect triangles. But the nurse's round face shows concern as she takes in Juliet's appearance. Still in her nightgown at nearly 9 o'clock, her hair uncombed, her eyes bright with something between fever and joy. "Child, what's gotten into you this morning?" the nurse asks, setting down the tray and moving to close the bedroom curtains that Juliet has left wide open. "You look like you've seen a ghost, or perhaps an angel. And why aren't you dressed? Your mother expects you downstairs for morning lessons with your French tutor." Juliet turns to the woman who has been more mother to her than her own mother. The woman who knows all her secrets except this newest and most dangerous one. "Nurse, tell me honestly, do you believe in love at first sight?" The nurse's weathered hands pause in their work, and she studies Juliet's face with the wisdom of someone who has loved and lost and loved again. "I believe in many kinds of love, sweet girl. The slow love that grows like roses in good soil, the passionate love that burns bright as candles, and yes, sometimes the lightning love that strikes without warning and changes everything it touches." "Why do you ask?" "Because," Juliet says, moving to her window and looking out over the garden where Romeo stood just hours before. "I think I've been struck by lightning." Back in Bloomsbury, Father Mackenzie rises from the garden bench, his decision made. "Romeo, I've seen too much hatred in this world to turn away from genuine love, regardless of family names. But I must ask you this. Are you certain this isn't merely rebellion against your parents, disguised as romance?" Romeo meets the priest's eyes steadily. "Father, I've rebelled against my family many times, in my clothes, my music, my politics, my friends. This is different. This feels like coming home." "Then I'll marry you," Father Mackenzie says simply. "But not today. Give yourselves one more day to be certain, to consider the consequences, to pray about your decision. If you both return tomorrow at noon, knowing fully what you're choosing, I'll perform the ceremony." Relief floods Romeo's face, followed immediately by a new anxiety. "Tomorrow? Father, her parents are pressuring her to marry Count Paris. Every day we wait increases the danger that she'll be forced into an engagement she doesn't want." "All the more reason to be certain of your choice," the priest replies gently. "True love can survive one more day of waiting. False love cannot survive even that." As Romeo leaves the chapel garden, walking back through Bloomsbury's winding streets toward Chelsea, he carries with him both hope and terror. Tomorrow, if all goes according to plan, he will marry Juliet Capulet and become part of a love story that will either heal two families or destroy them both. The London fog begins to lift, revealing a city caught between its grand past and uncertain future, where tradition and revolution dance together on every street corner, and where love, that most ancient and modern of forces, prepares to test its power against the deepest of hatreds. The next day arrives with uncharacteristic London sunshine, as if the city itself has decided to bless this impossible union. Street. Margaret's chapel sits bathed in golden light that streams through stained glass windows, depicting saints who seem to smile down with approval. The small sanctuary, with its simple wooden pews and modest altar, becomes transformed by the presence of love into something as grand as Westminster Abbey itself. Juliet arrives first, having told her family she was visiting her cousin in Kensington for afternoon tea. She wears a simple cream-colored dress, not the elaborate white gown her mother has already selected for her eventual marriage to Count Paris, but something that speaks of her own taste, rather than family expectations. The dress falls just below her knees, scandalously short by Capulet standards, and her hair hangs loose around her shoulders in soft waves that catch the filtered sunlight. In her hands, she carries a small bouquet of wildflowers picked from Hyde Park on her way through London, daisies and forget-me-nots that speak of simplicity and true love rather than arranged propriety. Father Mackenzie waits at the altar, wearing his finest ceremonial robes but with that same warm smile that speaks of inclusion rather than judgment. The chapel smells of old wood polish, candle wax, and the faint scent of roses from the garden beyond. Dust motes dance in shafts of colored light, and somewhere in the distance, the sounds of London continue. The rumble of buses, the calls of street vendors, the everyday symphony of a city going about its business, unaware that within these humble walls, history is about to be made. Romeo enters through the chapel's oak doors like a man walking into his own dream. He has transformed himself for this moment, trading his usual mod attire for a simple dark suit that speaks of sincerity rather than fashion. His hair is combed back neatly, though rebellious strands still fall across his forehead, and in his jacket pocket rests a simple gold ring that belonged to his grandmother, the only family heirloom he could claim without raising suspicions. Their eyes meet across the small chapel, and the world narrows to just this moment, just this choice, just this love that defies every rational thought and social expectation. Juliet moves toward him with steps that grow more confident with each heartbeat, while Romeo waits at the altar with hands that no longer shake, his decision as solid as the ancient stones beneath their feet. Dearly beloved, Father Mackenzie begins, his voice carrying easily through the intimate space. We are gathered here in the sight of God, and in the presence of love itself, to join Romeo and Juliet in holy matrimony. This is not a ceremony born of family arrangement or social convenience, but of genuine affection and mutual respect. The words of the traditional ceremony take on new meaning in this context, where every promise carries the weight of revolution, where every vow becomes an act of defiance against a world that would keep them apart. When Romeo speaks his vows, his voice rings with conviction that echoes off the chapel walls. I, Romeo, take you, Juliet, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. Juliet's response comes clear and strong, surprising even herself with the power in her voice. I, Juliet, take you, Romeo, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. The ring slides onto Juliet's finger with the weight of eternity, and when Father Mackenzie pronounces them husband and wife, the very air in the chapel seems to shimmer with possibility. Their kiss is gentle, reverent, and absolutely revolutionary. Two young people choosing their own destiny in a world that insists destiny must be chosen for them. Outside the chapel, London continues its eternal dance. In Mayfair, Lady Capulet reviews wedding preparations for a ceremony that will never happen, discussing flower arrangements with florists who cannot imagine their careful plans being discarded for wildflowers picked from a public park. In Chelsea, Lord Montague attends business meetings, unaware that his son has just joined his family to their greatest enemies through bonds stronger than blood or business contracts. But in one corner of the city, hatred simmers like acid in a copper pot. Tybalt Capulet, still burning with fury from seeing Romeo at the family party, prowls the streets of central London with his friends, all of them sharp and dangerous in their perfectly pressed suits. Unlike the older generation's refined disapproval, Tybalt's anger has teeth. He carries a switchblade in his jacket and knows how to use it. Having learned street fighting in the same schools that taught him proper table manners, that Montague scum thinks he can show his face in our house, charm our women, and walk away unmarked. Tybalt snarls to his companion, his usually perfect hair disheveled by angry gestures. Well, he's mistaken. The next time I see Romeo Montague, I'll teach him the cost of disrespecting the Capulet name. Meanwhile, in their brief moment of perfect happiness, Romeo and Juliet walk hand in hand through Bloomsbury's quiet streets, their wedding rings catching the afternoon sunlight that seems to follow them like a blessing. They stop at a small cafe where poets gather to read their work, ordering tea and talking quietly about their future together, about the flat they'll find somewhere between Chelsea and Mayfair, about the children they'll raise to know love rather than hatred. "Mrs. Montague," Romeo says softly, testing the sound of her new name. "Mrs. Montague," Juliet repeats, her smile bright enough to power all of London's street lamps. "I like the sound of that. Though I suppose we'll have to tell our families eventually." Eventually, Romeo agrees, though both know that eventually feels as distant as the moon. For now, they exist in a bubble of perfect happiness. Newlyweds in a city that doesn't yet know it has witnessed a miracle. But London keeps its own counsel, and in the shadows between buildings, in the whispered conversations of family loyalists, in the grinding wheels of tradition and expectation, forces are already moving that will test this new love against the oldest hatred. The fog begins to roll in from the Thames as afternoon fades toward evening, wrapping around the city like a harbinger of change. The chapel bells chime 4 o'clock as Romeo and Juliet part ways. He to return to Chelsea before his absence is noticed. She to Mayfair to play the dutiful daughter one more time. They carry with them the secret of their marriage like a flame cupped in protective hands, knowing that soon, very soon, they will have to let that flame burn bright enough for all the world to see. But for now, in this golden afternoon that seems suspended between past and future, they are simply two young people who have chosen love over law, hope over hatred, and their own hearts over the expectations of everyone who came before them. London witnesses their joy and holds its breath, wondering whether love truly can conquer all, or whether some divisions run too deep for even the most passionate hearts to bridge. The afternoon heat hangs heavy over London's streets, unusual for a city more accustomed to gray skies and gentle drizzle. The sun beats down on black asphalt and chrome bumpers, making the air shimmer with waves of heat that rise from the pavement like invisible flames. Near Sloane Square, where Chelsea's bohemian energy meets the more traditional heart of London, the streets buzz with restless energy that seems to press against shop windows and gather in the shadows between buildings. Romeo walks these sun-baked streets like a man transformed, his recent marriage to Juliet filling him with a joy so profound it seems to radiate from his very skin. His mod jacket hangs loose over his shoulders, his narrow tie loosened against the heat, and his dark hair falls across his forehead in waves that catch the harsh sunlight. Every step carries the confident rhythm of a man who has found his place in the world, who has discovered that love truly can conquer the impossible. But trouble finds him in the form of familiar voices echoing off Georgian brick walls. Mercutio's distinctive laugh bounces between buildings, followed by Benvolio's more measured tones, and Romeo rounds a corner to find his two closest friends holding court outside a traditional pub whose windows gleam like amber in the afternoon light. Young men in various states of mod fashion lean against parked scooters, their Vespa and Lambretta machines lined up like metal steeds waiting for battle. "Romeo!" Mercutio calls out, his voice carrying that edge of manic energy that always preceded either brilliant entertainment or spectacular trouble. "Come join us in this glorious heat. The sun has driven half of London mad, and the other half interesting." Mercutio himself embodies this madness, his suit jacket discarded, his shirt open at the collar, his hair damp with perspiration that makes him look like a fallen angel who's been wrestling with demons in the London heat. His eyes hold that wild gleam that Romeo knows means danger is never far away, but today, buoyed by his secret joy, Romeo feels invincible. "Mercutio, my friend," Romeo replies, clasping his friend's hand with genuine warmth. "You speak of madness, but I've found perfect sanity in the most unlikely place." "Have you now?" Benvolio asks, studying Romeo's face with the careful attention of someone who's known him since childhood. "You look different, Romeo. Happier. But also charged, like the air before a thunderstorm." Before Romeo can respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoes off the narrow street walls, and the temperature seems to drop despite the blazing sun. Tybalt Capulet emerges from the shadows between buildings, like a predator who has finally cornered his prey. His perfectly pressed suit immaculate despite the heat, his dark hair slicked back with pomade that catches the light like black oil. Behind him walk three companions, all equally sharp, equally dangerous, all carrying themselves with the rigid posture of men who have been raised to believe that honor matters more than life itself. Well, Tybalt says, his voice carrying the cultured accent of Mayfair's finest families, though underneath lurks something harder and more dangerous than proper breeding. Romeo Montague, gracing the streets of civilized London with his presence. How quaint. The heat suddenly feels oppressive, pressing down on the small group like the weight of accumulated hatred. Windows in the surrounding buildings seem to watch like eyes, while the distant sounds of London traffic fade into insignificance. This moment, this confrontation, becomes the center of the universe, with everything else orbiting around the gravitational pull of old grudges and new tensions. Romeo, still glowing with his secret happiness, attempts diplomacy with the magnanimous spirit of a man in love. Tybalt, I hold no quarrel with you. The sun is hot, tempers run high, and wise men know when to walk away from unnecessary conflict. But his words only inflame Tybalt's fury further. The young Capulet's hand moves instinctively toward his jacket pocket, where the outline of a switchblade presses against the fine fabric. Walk away? You show your face in my cousin's house, you charm your way into polite company where you don't belong, and now you speak to me of walking away? Mercutio steps forward, his mercurial nature shifting from playful to predatory in an instant. His own jacket falls open, revealing the flash of steel tucked against his ribs. Easy, Tybalt. The boys offered you peace. In this heat, perhaps we should all consider the wisdom of keeping our tempers and our blades cool. Peace. Tybalt spits, the word bitter in his mouth. I'll have no peace while Montague scum think they can walk freely through London, corrupting decent society with their noise and vulgarity. His dark eyes fix on Romeo with laser intensity. You insulted my family by your very presence at our gathering. Satisfaction must be had. The switchblade appears in Tybalt's hand with practiced ease, its chrome surface reflecting the harsh sunlight in deadly fragments. The sound of the blade locking into place echoes off the building walls like the crack of a starting pistol, and suddenly the afternoon air crackles with violence waiting to be born. Romeo holds up his hands, still attempting to diffuse the situation through words rather than weapons. Tybalt, you don't understand. I cannot fight you. I have reasons. Good reasons. To love your name as much as my own. Please, let's end this before it starts. But his refusal to draw steel only further enrages Tybalt, who sees it as cowardice rather than wisdom. Coward! You Montagues are all the same. Noise and bluster until steel appears, then suddenly full of pretty words and peaceful intentions. Mercutio's face darkens with fury on his friend's behalf. Romeo may turn the other cheek, but I have no such Christian charity. His own blade appears, its edge sharp enough to cut the thick air itself. If you want to fight, Tybalt, then by God, you'll have one. The two young men circle each other like dancers in a deadly ballet, their feet finding purchase on sun-heated asphalt, while their blades catch and throw back fragments of light. Around them, their friends form a rough circle, some shouting encouragement, others calling for restraint. All of them caught in the gravitational pull of violence that seems as inevitable as sunset. Romeo watches in growing horror as his secret joy collides with ancient hatred, as his new status as Tybalt's cousin-in-law through marriage makes him powerless to prevent what's coming. The heat presses down like a physical weight, and somewhere in the distance, Big Ben chimes the hour, marking time toward tragedy. The fight begins with the swift, brutal efficiency of young men trained in violence, their blades singing through the air as they test each other's speed and skill. But what starts as a show of bravado quickly turns deadly serious, as hatred and pride fuel movements that grow increasingly desperate and dangerous. London holds its breath, while the sun beats down mercilessly on a street about to witness the moment when love's triumph transforms into tragedy's beginning. The blade fight unfolds with the terrible grace of a nightmare, steel catching sunlight as it arcs through the sweltering air. Mercutio moves like quicksilver, his switchblade dancing in patterns that speak of street fights and back-alley lessons learned the hard way. But Tybalt, for all his aristocratic bearing, proves equally deadly. His movements precise and calculated, each thrust and parry the product of expensive fencing lessons combined with raw, burning hatred. Come on then, Prince of Cats! Mercutio taunts, using the nickname that has followed Tybalt since childhood. "Show me if that blade is as sharp as your tongue." They circle each other in the narrow space between parked cars and Georgian building walls, their feet finding purchase on asphalt made treacherous by the day's heat. The metallic ring of blade meeting blade echoes off brick and mortar like some perverse church bell, calling London's attention to this moment of violence born from pride and ancient grudges. Romeo watches in growing desperation, still caught between his secret knowledge and his public persona. "Stop this," he shouts, stepping toward the combatants. "Mercutio, put up your sword. Tybalt, remember we are kinsmen now." But his words only confuse the fighters and enrage the spectators. Kinsmen? What does Romeo mean? The watching young men exchange glances, some beginning to mutter about Montague cowardice, others wondering if Romeo has lost his mind in the heat. It happens in the space between heartbeats. In that fatal moment when attention wavers, and death slips through the gap like morning fog through an open window. As Romeo steps between the fighters, trying desperately to separate them, Tybalt's blade finds its mark. Not in Romeo as intended, but in Mercutio, whose own movement to protect his friend puts him directly in the path of sharp steel. The sound Mercutio makes is less a cry than a sigh, as if he's suddenly very tired and needs to sit down. The blade slides between his ribs with surgical precision, finding the space between bone and sinew that leads directly to the heart. For a moment, he stands perfectly still, looking down at the growing red stain spreading across his white shirt like spilled wine on fresh linen. "A plague on both your houses," Mercutio whispers, his voice already growing faint. "They have made worms meat of me. I have it, and soundly too. Your houses." His legs give way, and he crumples to the sun-baked asphalt like a marionette whose strings have been cut. Romeo drops to his knees beside his fallen friend, his hands pressing against the wound that pumps life onto the London street with each weakening heartbeat. Mercutio's eyes, still bright with that wild intelligence that made him magnetic, fix on Romeo's face with terrible clarity. "Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man," Mercutio says, even now unable to resist a play on words, though his voice comes out as barely more than a breath. "Why the devil came you between us?" "I was hurt under your arm. I thought all for the best," Romeo replies, his voice breaking as he watches his dearest friend's life ebb away onto uncaring asphalt. The secret of his marriage burns in his throat like swallowed fire. If only he could explain. If only Mercutio could understand that he was trying to preserve peace between families now joined by love. "Help me into some house, Benvolio," Mercutio gasps, blood now flecking his lips. "Or I shall faint." But even as Benvolio moves to help, they all know it's too late. Death has already laid its claim, and no London hospital can recall what has been given to the grave. Mercutio dies there on the street, his blood mixing with the dust and grime of everyday London, while around him the city continues its eternal dance. Buses rumble past at the end of the street, shopkeepers serve customers behind glass windows, and somewhere a radio plays the Beatles' "Help" with unconscious irony. Romeo kneels beside the body of his friend, something fundamental breaking inside his chest like a dam giving way before floodwaters. All the joy of his secret marriage, all the hope for healing between the families, all the love that had made him feel invincible just moments before, it all washes away in the face of this senseless death. Tybalt, realizing what has happened, backing away with his blade still dripping. He sought his own death, Tybalt says, but his voice lacks conviction. "I meant to kill you, Romeo, not him. The fault is yours for interfering." Something cold and terrible settles over Romeo's features, transforming the peaceful young man who had tried to prevent this fight into something harder and more dangerous. His own switchblade appears in his hand with fluid motion, its chrome surface reflecting the harsh London sun like a fragment of winter in the summer heat. "Now, Tybalt," Romeo says, his voice carrying a deadly calm that makes the watching crowd step back instinctively. "Take the villain back again. That late thou gavest me. Mercutio's soul is but a little way above our heads, staying for thine to keep him company. Either thou or I, or both, must go with him." The second fight is nothing like the first. Where Mercutio and Tybalt had danced around each other with elaborate technique, Romeo moves with the pure efficiency of grief transformed into vengeance. There are no taunts, no showing off, just the deadly serious business of settling accounts written in blood. Tybalt, despite his skill, finds himself facing something he's never encountered before, A man who no longer cares whether he lives or dies, who fights not for pride or honor but for the simple, terrible need to balance the scales of justice with more blood. Romeo's blade moves like liquid silver, finding gaps in Tybalt's defense with the inevitability of water flowing downhill. The end comes quickly. Romeo's knife slides between Tybalt's ribs with the same surgical precision that had claimed Mercutio, but this time the strike is intentional, calculated, final. Tybalt's eyes widen with surprise, and something that might be respect before the light in them fades forever. "He's dead," Romeo says simply, standing over Tybalt's body with his blade still dripping. Around him, the watching crowd has gone silent, shocked by the swift transformation of their friend from peacemaker to killer. The heat continues to press down on the London street, but now it feels like the breath of hell itself. Sirens wail in the distance. Someone has called the police, and soon this street will be crawling with constables in their tall helmets, asking questions that Romeo cannot answer without revealing secrets that would destroy more lives than have already been lost. Benvolio grabs Romeo's arm, his face pale with shock and fear. "Romeo, you must run. The prince will doom you to death if you are taken. The citizens are up, and Tybalt slain. Stand not amazed. Away." But Romeo stands frozen, staring down at Tybalt's body, seeing not his enemy but Juliet's cousin, his new wife's flesh and blood. The man whose death has just made him a murderer in the eyes of the law and a traitor in the eyes of love. His secret marriage, meant to heal the rift between the families, has instead created a chasm that no amount of love can bridge. The police sirens grow louder, and finally Romeo moves, running through London's labyrinthine streets like a hunted animal, his wedding ring, worn for less than a day, now weighing on his finger like a shackle forged from his own good intentions. Behind him, two bodies cool on sun-baked asphalt, while the city of London witnesses the moment when love's greatest triumph transforms into its most terrible tragedy. The news spreads through London like wildfire through dry timber, carried by witnesses who scatter from the bloody scene like startled pigeons. Within an hour, every telephone in Mayfair rings with the same terrible message. Tybalt Capulet is dead, killed by Romeo Montague, in a street fight that has left two young men bleeding on the asphalt and their families forever changed. In his oak-paneled study, Lord Capulet receives the news while reviewing business papers, his crystal whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips as the telephone receiver trembles in his other hand. The room, filled with leather-bound books and oil paintings of dignified ancestors, suddenly feels cold despite the afternoon heat pressing against the tall windows. His wife's scream echoes through the Georgian mansion's corridors when he tells her, a sound of pure anguish that makes the crystal chandeliers ring like funeral bells. Tybalt, Lady Capulet Keynes, collapsing into a velvet chair that has supported generations of Capulet women through crisis and celebration. "My brother's child, as good as my own son. That villain Romeo has stolen him from us, murdered him in cold blood on the very streets of London." The Capulet mansion transforms into a house of mourning with swift, terrible efficiency. Black crepe appears on the doors and windows, mirrors are covered with dark cloth, and the classical music that usually drifts through the halls is replaced by the heavy silence of grief. Servants move like shadows through rooms that suddenly feel too large and too empty, while family members gather in huddled groups, their voices low and venomous as they speak of justice and retribution. But upstairs, in her ivory tower bedroom, Juliet experiences a different kind of torment. The news comes to her through her nurse, who arrives breathless and sobbing, her round face streaked with tears, and her words tumbling over each other in their haste to escape. "Oh, child, such terrible news," the nurse wails, wringing her hands like washing rags. "Death and destruction have come to our house. Your cousin Tybalt, brave Tybalt, is dead. And that villain Romeo." Romeo? Juliet's heart stops beating for what feels like an eternity. Is Romeo dead too? Dead? No, worse than dead. The nurse continues, not understanding the relief that floods Juliet's face. Romeo lives, but he's banished from London forever. The prince himself has decreed it. Exile rather than execution. Mercy mixed with justice. But he's killed your cousin, sweet girl. Murdered Tybalt in the street like a common criminal. Juliet's world tilts on its axis as two impossible truths collide in her mind. Romeo, her beloved husband of less than a day, has killed Tybalt, her cousin, her childhood playmate, the boy who taught her to climb trees and steal biscuits from the kitchen. The man she loves has spilled the blood of the family she was born to, creating a chasm that seems impossible to bridge. Tybalt is dead, and Romeo banished, she whispers, sinking onto her bed as if her legs can no longer support the weight of this knowledge. That banished, that one word, banished, has slain 10,000 Tybalts. The nurse, misunderstanding her grief, pats Juliet's hand with clumsy comfort. There, child. Weep for your cousin as is proper. That Romeo was never worthy of you anyway, violent as he's proved himself to be. Don't speak against him, Juliet flashes, her grief transforming into fierce protection. He's my husband. She catches herself just in time, the secret still burning on her tongue like swallowed fire. I mean, he was. He seemed kind when I met him at the party. Meanwhile, across the city in a cramped room above a Chelsea bookshop, Romeo hides like a wounded animal, his world reduced to four walls and the terrible weight of what he's done. Father Mackenzie has given him sanctuary. But even this holy place cannot provide peace for a soul torn between love and guilt, hope and despair. Banishment. Romeo repeats the word like a curse, pacing the small room with caged energy. They call this mercy? To be cut off from Juliet is worse than death. At least the dead don't know what they've lost. Father Mackenzie watches this young man who was glowing with happiness just hours before, now transformed by violence and consequence into something hollow-eyed and desperate. Romeo, you must see the mercy in this judgment. The prince could have ordered your execution. Instead, you have your life. Life? Romeo laughs bitterly. What life is there for me beyond London's borders? Juliet is here, in this city, breathing this air, walking these streets. Every mile between us will be like a dagger in my heart. The afternoon light streaming through the bookshop's dusty windows takes on the golden quality of late summer, but it brings no warmth to Romeo's exile. Below, London continues its eternal dance. Buses rumble down King's Road, shoppers browse the boutiques of Carnaby Street, and young couples walk hand in hand through parks where Romeo and Juliet will never walk together again. Back in Mayfair, as the Capulet family struggles with grief and rage, Lord Capulet makes a decision that will seal his daughter's fate. In his study, surrounded by the portraits of ancestors who seem to nod their approval, he meets with Count Paris, whose condolences mask poorly concealed satisfaction at Romeo's exile and Tybalt's death. Paris, Lord Capulet says, his voice heavy with the authority of generations, these violent times demand swift action. My daughter needs stability, protection, a husband who can shield her from the chaos that seems to follow wherever young people make their own choices. Count Paris, impeccable in his black mourning attire, nods gravely. I share your concerns, sir. Young Juliet is obviously devastated by her cousin's death. Perhaps marriage would provide the healing influence she needs. Indeed. Lord Capulet agrees, pouring himself another whiskey from the crystal decanter that has witnessed decades of family decisions. Thursday, then. We'll arrange the ceremony for Thursday. A quiet affair, given our mourning, but binding nonetheless. Thursday. The word hangs in the air like a death sentence, though neither man realizes they're signing more than a marriage contract. Upstairs, Juliet continues her complex grief, mourning Tybalt while aching for Romeo, loving the man who killed her cousin, hating herself for that love, and remaining entirely ignorant of the plans being made for her future. The London evening brings no relief from the heat, and as night falls, the city's lights create a golden web across the darkness. In Chelsea, Romeo stares out at those lights, knowing that somewhere among them, Juliet grieves. In Mayfair, Juliet sits by her window, looking out at the same lights, wondering if Romeo can see them too from wherever he hides. Two hearts, joined by secret vows, now separated by blood and banishment, beat with the same desperate rhythm across the sprawling city. Love, which had seemed so powerful just that morning, now appears fragile as spun glass, beautiful and transparent, and easily shattered by the harsh realities of family loyalty and social justice. The nurse finally leaves Juliet alone with her sorrow, and in the privacy of her bedroom, the young bride allows herself to feel the full weight of her loss. She is married to a man she cannot see, loves someone her family now considers their greatest enemy, and carries a secret that grows heavier with each passing hour. Big Ben chimes midnight across London, marking the end of a day that began with such hope and ends with such despair. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new pressures, new impossible choices. But tonight, in the darkness of their separate prisons, Romeo and Juliet hold on to the memory of their brief, perfect happiness, not knowing that even greater trials await them in the days to come. The fog begins to roll in from the Thames, wrapping around the city like a shroud, while London sleeps uneasily, disturbed by dreams of love and death, hope and hatred, and the terrible price that must sometimes be paid when young hearts dare to choose their own destiny in a world determined to choose for them. The morning light filters through the Georgian windows of the Capulet mansion with unusual harshness, as if even the sun disapproves of what transpires within these walls. The house still bears the black crape of mourning for Tybalt, but beneath the grief lies something harder and more determined: the iron will of a family that has decided to take control of fate itself. Juliet descends the grand staircase like a sleepwalker, her pale blue dress hanging loose on a frame that seems to have shrunk overnight with sorrow. Her eyes, red from crying, hold the hollow look of someone who has aged years in the space of a single day. The dining room awaits her with its crystal chandelier casting cold light on polished mahogany, while her parents sit in formal positions that suggest a tribunal rather than a family breakfast. Lord Capulet rises as she enters, his morning coat immaculate despite the early hour, his silver hair perfectly groomed as if grief requires the same attention to appearance as celebration. Lady Capulet remains seated, draped in black silk that makes her pale skin appear almost translucent, her fingers worrying the pearl necklace that has been in the family for generations. "Juliet," Lord Capulet begins, his voice carrying the weight of decision already made. "Sit down, my child. Your mother and I have important news to share with you." The breakfast table, set with the finest china and silver, suddenly feels like a stage set for some terrible performance. Toast grows cold in silver racks, tea cools in delicate cups, and preserved oranges sit untouched in crystal bowls, while the real business of the morning unfolds. In light of recent tragic events, Lady Capulet says, her voice carefully modulated to suggest maternal concern rather than the steel beneath, "We've decided that you need the stability and protection that only marriage can provide. Count Paris has renewed his proposal, and we've accepted on your behalf." The words hit Juliet like physical blows, each syllable a hammer strike against her already shattered composure. The secret of her marriage to Romeo burns in her throat like swallowed poison, while the reality of her parents' decision crashes over her like a Thames tide at flood. "Marriage?" she whispers, her voice barely audible above the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock that has marked Capulet time for 3 generations. "To Count Paris? But I'm not ready for marriage. I'm still in mourning for Tybalt." "Which is precisely why this arrangement is perfect," Lord Capulet replies, moving to stand behind her chair with the authority of absolute paternal power. "Paris understands your grief. He's willing to provide a quiet ceremony, respectful of our loss, but binding nonetheless. Thursday morning at St. Paul's Cathedral. The arrangements are already made." Thursday. The same word that had sealed her fate yesterday now returns like a curse, each repetition making the impossible more concrete, more unavoidable. Juliet's wedding ring, Romeo's ring, hidden on a chain beneath her dress, seems to burn against her skin like a brand. Thursday? Juliet stands so abruptly that her chair scrapes against the hardwood floor with a sound like fingernails on slate. "Father, you cannot mean it. Thursday is only 3 days away. Surely such haste is unseemly, especially with Tybalt barely cold in his grave." But Lord Capulet's face hardens with the implacable will of a man who has never been seriously challenged in his own house. "Haste? My dear child. In times like these, delay is the enemy of stability. Romeo Montague's violence has shown us all what comes of allowing young people too much freedom in their choices. You will marry Paris on Thursday, and that is final." Juliet's composure finally cracks, and the desperate truth comes pouring out like water through a burst dam. "I will not marry Paris. I cannot marry Paris. You don't understand, I am already." But she catches herself just in time, the secret of her marriage to Romeo dying on her lips as she realizes the catastrophic consequences of revelation. Instead, she falls to her knees before her father, her hands clasped in supplication, her voice breaking with desperation. "Please, father, I beg you. Give me more time. Let me properly mourn Tybalt. Let me prepare my heart for such a momentous step." Lord Capulet's face transforms with a fury that Juliet has never seen before, his usual paternal indulgence replaced by something cold and implacable. "Time? Prepare your heart? I've given you 17 years of time, provided you with every luxury, every advantage, and this is how you repay my generosity? With defiance? With ingratitude? His voice rises with each word, echoing off the dining room walls where oil paintings of stern ancestors seem to nod their approval of paternal authority. You will marry Count Paris on Thursday morning, or you will find yourself cast out from this house with nothing but the clothes on your back. I'll have no disobedient daughter under my roof. Lady Capulet watches this exchange with the detached interest of someone observing a play, her pearl necklace clicking softly as her fingers work over the smooth beads. When she finally speaks, her voice carries the chill of winter wind through Georgian windows. Your father is right, Juliet. We've been too indulgent, too modern in our thinking. Look what that approach has brought us. Violence in the streets, young men dead before their time, families torn apart by foolish romantic notions. Marriage to Paris will save you from such chaos. Juliet looks between her parents with growing desperation, seeing in their faces the immovable force of tradition and parental authority. The breakfast room, which had always felt like a sanctuary of family warmth, now feels like a courtroom where her fate has been decided without trial or appeal. "Nurse!" Juliet calls out desperately, turning toward the elderly woman who has been more mother to her than her own mother. "Surely you understand, help me make them see reason." But the nurse, standing in the doorway in her black mourning dress, avoids Juliet's eyes. When she finally speaks, her voice carries the weight of pragmatic surrender. "Child, your parents know what's best. Count Paris is a good man, wealthy and kind. Perhaps it's time to put aside childish dreams and accept the wisdom of your elders." The betrayal hits Juliet harder than her parents' ultimatum. The nurse, who had helped her meet Romeo secretly, who had carried messages between the lovers, who had seemed to understand the power of true love, now stands with the forces of convention and arrangement. Alone in a room full of people who claim to love her, Juliet realizes that she must find her own path through this maze of impossible choices. Her parents will not relent, her nurse will not help, and somewhere in London, Romeo lives in exile, unaware that his secret wife faces forced marriage to another man. "Very well," Juliet says finally, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her heart. "If that is your decision, then I must find a way to accept it." Lord Capulet's stern expression softens slightly, mistaking her apparent submission for genuine acceptance. "There's my sensible daughter. You'll see, Juliet. Marriage to Paris will bring you happiness you never imagined possible." But as Juliet curtsies and excuses herself from the breakfast room, her mind races with desperate plans. Thursday morning looms like an executioner's appointment. And between now and then, she must find some way to escape a fate that would make her not just Paris's wife, but Romeo's betrayer, and her own heart's murderer. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 9 times as Juliet climbs the stairs to her room, each chime marking time toward disaster. London spreads outside her bedroom windows like a chessboard, where she has suddenly realized she's been playing against masters while thinking it was a children's game. But somewhere in this impossible puzzle, there must be a solution. There must be someone who can help her escape this marriage without destroying everyone she loves in the process. Her thoughts turn to Father Mackenzie, the kind priest who married her to Romeo, who believes in love over law, who might understand the terrible choice she faces. As morning light streams through her bedroom windows, Juliet begins to plan her escape from Thursday's trap, not knowing that her desperate solution will lead to consequences far more terrible than even her darkest fears can imagine. The afternoon finds Juliet moving through London's streets like a woman possessed, her conservative dress and proper handbag marking her as distinctly out of place among the mod boutiques and coffee houses of Bloomsbury. She has told her parents she's visiting the family priest for spiritual guidance regarding her upcoming marriage, a lie that tastes bitter as medicine but serves its purpose. The fog that perpetually hovers over the Thames seems to follow her inland, wrapping around Georgian terraces and Victorian mansion blocks like ghostly fingers reaching for the living. St. Margaret's Chapel sits quiet in its small garden, the roses Father Mackenzie tends now drooping in the unusual heat that has gripped London for days. The priest himself works among his flower beds with the methodical patience of a man who understands that some problems require time and prayer to resolve. His sleeves are rolled up despite the clerical collar, and his wire-rimmed spectacles catch the filtered sunlight as he looks up at Juliet's approach. "Mrs. Montague," he says quietly, using her married name for the first time since the ceremony, his voice carrying both warmth and concern. "You look as though you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." Juliet's composure, held together by sheer will during the confrontation with her parents, finally crumbles in the presence of the one person who knows her secret truth. Tears flow down her cheeks like the London rain that has been absent for too many days, and her words come in broken gasps that speak of desperation beyond reason. "Father, I need your help. My parents, they've arranged a marriage. To Count Paris. Thursday morning at St. Paul's Cathedral. They don't know about Romeo, about our wedding, about any of it. They think they're saving me from the chaos of modern London, but they're destroying me instead." Father Mackenzie sets down his gardening tools with careful deliberation, his weathered hands steady despite the gravity of what he's hearing. The small chapel garden, with its climbing roses and weathered stone benches, becomes a sanctuary where impossible problems require impossible solutions. "Thursday," he repeats, his voice heavy with understanding. "My child, that gives us precious little time. Have you told them the truth about your marriage to Romeo?" "I tried," Juliet says, sinking onto the stone bench, where morning glory vines provide shade from the relentless sun. "But the words died in my throat. If they knew I had married Romeo, Romeo who killed Tybalt, Romeo who is banished, they would disown me entirely. My mother would die of shame. My father would cast me out with nothing. And Romeo might face even worse than exile if they demanded vengeance for what they would see as the ultimate betrayal." The priest walks slowly around his small garden, his steps measured and thoughtful, while Big Ben's distant chimes mark the passing hours like a countdown to catastrophe. Sparrows chirp from hidden nests among the ivy, and somewhere nearby, a radio plays the Kinks' dedicated follower of fashion with unconscious irony. Here, in this garden, fashion and social expectations become the chains that bind young hearts to impossible choices. "There is a way," Father Mackenzie says finally, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that will either save or damn them all. "It's dangerous, perhaps desperate, but it might work if you have the courage to see it through." He disappears into the chapel's vestry, returning with a small glass vial that catches the afternoon light like captured starlight. The liquid inside appears clear as water but seems to pulse with its own inner glow, as if it contains something more than mere chemistry. "This potion comes from a progressive pharmacist who serves our community," the priest explains, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It will give you the appearance of death so complete that no examination will detect life. Your pulse will stop, your breathing will cease, your skin will grow cold as winter stone. To all appearances, you will be dead." Juliet stares at the vial with a mixture of fascination and terror. The solution to her impossible problem sits in a container no larger than her thumb, but the cure seems almost as frightening as the disease. "How long?" she asks, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. 24 hours, Father Mackenzie replies. "Perhaps 36 at most. Long enough for your family to discover your apparent death, to make arrangements for burial, to transport your body to the family crypt, and long enough for me to send word to Romeo, to bring him back to London, under cover of darkness." The plan unfolds between them like a map to salvation drawn in dangerous territory. Juliet will take the potion Wednesday night. Before her wedding day, her family will find her apparently dead Thursday morning, calling off the marriage to Count Paris in their grief. While London mourns another young life lost to the violence of modern times, Romeo will return secretly to claim his living bride from what the world believes is her tomb. But what if it goes wrong? Juliet asks, her practical mind finding flaws in even this desperate salvation. What if the potion kills me truly? What if Romeo doesn't receive your message in time? What if my family decides to bury me immediately, before you can reach him? Father Mackenzie takes her hands in his weathered palms warm against her cold fingers. "My child, I won't lie to you about the risks. This plan requires faith. Faith in God, faith in love, faith in the power of truth to overcome even the greatest obstacles. But consider the alternative. Marriage to Paris while still bound to Romeo would be bigamy before God, and betrayal before your own heart." The chapel bells chime 4 o'clock, their bronze voices carrying across Bloomsbury like a call to prayer or a warning of time running short. Juliet looks at the vial in her hands, this tiny vessel that contains either her salvation or her damnation, while around them, London continues its eternal dance of tradition and change, Old wisdom and new folly. There's something else, the priest continues, his voice heavy with the weight of complete honesty. The awakening from this potion is unpleasant. You'll experience confusion, disorientation, perhaps temporary amnesia, and there may be effects we don't fully understand. This is not a medicine that comes with royal approval or university study, but Juliet has already made her choice, her fingers closing around the vial with the desperate grip of a drowning woman clutching driftwood. Father, I face a choice between certain destruction and possible salvation. The risk is terrible, but the alternative is impossible. She rises from the stone bench with new determination, the vial hidden in her handbag like a secret weapon against fate itself. The London afternoon grows late around them, casting long shadows across the garden where roses bloom despite the heat, where hope and desperation intertwine like the morning glory vines that climb the chapel walls. I'll take it Wednesday night, after my parents have said goodnight, Juliet says, her voice growing stronger with each word. By Thursday morning, Juliet Capulet will be dead to the world, and perhaps Juliet Montague can finally live. Father Mackenzie nods gravely, his hand raised in blessing over this most desperate of plans. May God forgive us all for what we're about to attempt, and may He grant that love prove stronger than death, hope more powerful than despair. As Juliet leaves the chapel garden, walking back through Bloomsbury's winding streets toward Mayfair and the prison of her family's expectations, she carries with her both the means of her salvation and the instrument of potential tragedy. The vial rests against her heart like a second pulse, reminding her with every step that sometimes love requires the ultimate gamble, a willingness to risk everything, even life itself, for the chance to choose one's own destiny. London's evening light turns golden around her as she walks, and somewhere in the city's vast expanse, Romeo continues his exile, unaware that his secret wife has just chosen to risk death rather than betray their impossible love. Wednesday night descends over London like a heavy velvet curtain, bringing with it the electric tension that precedes thunderstorms and revolutions. The Capulet mansion settles into its evening routine with the clockwork precision of generations. Servants extinguish lights in unused rooms. Lord Capulet reviews tomorrow's wedding arrangements one final time in his study, and Lady Capulet takes her nightly dose of laudanum to help her sleep through grief that sits like lead in her chest. But in her ivory tower bedroom, Juliet sits before her vanity mirror like a condemned woman preparing for execution. The vial from Father Mackenzie rests on the mahogany surface beside her silver brush and pearl earrings, its clear contents catching the lamplight like liquid moonbeams. Tomorrow morning, her parents expect to wake their dutiful daughter for her wedding to Count Paris. Instead, they will find what appears to be a corpse, cold and still as winter stone. Juliet? The nurse's familiar voice interrupts her dark contemplations as the elderly woman enters with a cup of chamomile tea, her round face creased with concern. Child, you've barely touched your dinner, and tomorrow is your wedding day. You need your strength. Juliet accepts the teacup with hands that tremble slightly, the porcelain rim clicking against her teeth as she forces herself to take a sip. The nurse fusses around the room, laying out the wedding dress that Lady Capulet has chosen. Cream silk with pearl buttons, conservative as a nun's habit but beautiful in its restrained elegance. The sight of it makes Juliet's stomach twist with guilt and desperation. Will there be anything else, dear one? The nurse asks, her voice carrying the forced cheerfulness of someone trying to lift spirits that seem determined to sink. Perhaps a bit of music? I could ask one of the servants to bring up the wireless. No. Thank you, nurse, Juliet replies, her voice steadier than she feels. I think I'd like to be alone tonight, to pray, to prepare my heart for tomorrow. The lies taste like ashes in her mouth, but they serve their purpose. The nurse studies her face with the sharp eyes of someone who has known Juliet since birth, and for a terrifying moment, Juliet fears her secret will be discovered. But finally, the older woman nods and moves toward the door, pausing only to look back with maternal concern. Sweet dreams, my girl. Tomorrow begins a new chapter of your life. If only she knew how prophetic those words would prove to be. Alone at last, Juliet rises and moves to her bedroom window, looking out over the London skyline where lights twinkle like earthbound stars. Somewhere among those lights, Romeo exists in exile, unaware that his wife contemplates a desperate gamble that will either reunite them forever or separate them for eternity. Big Ben's chimes drift across the city, marking 11 o'clock with bronze voices that seem to count down to her moment of truth. She returns to her vanity and lifts the vial with reverent care, holding it up to the lamplight where the liquid seems to glow with its own inner fire. Father Mackenzie's warnings echo in her mind like funeral bells, the risks, the uncertainties, the possibility that she might never wake from this artificial death. But the alternative looms even more terrifying. Marriage to Paris, betrayal of Romeo, a lifetime of living as someone else's wife while her true husband wanders the world in exile. Romeo, she whispers to her reflection in the mirror, addressing the absent love who drives her to this desperate choice. If you could see me now, would you tell me to be brave? Would you say that love is worth any risk, any sacrifice? Her reflection offers no answers, only the pale face of a young woman caught between impossible choices, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes bright with unshed tears and desperate determination. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes the half hour, and Juliet knows she can delay no longer. She opens the vial with fingers that no longer shake. Fear has been replaced by the cold clarity of absolute resolve. The liquid has no scent, no taste as she lifts it to her lips, nothing to warn of the strange journey she's about to undertake. To Romeo, she says, as if toasting with champagne at their wedding reception, rather than drinking what might be poison. And to love that conquers even death. The potion slides down her throat like water, and for a moment, nothing happens. The bedroom remains exactly as it was. Lamplight casting shadows on wallpaper, traffic sounds drifting through Georgian windows, the scent of her mother's roses climbing from the garden below. Juliet almost laughs at her own fears. Perhaps the potion is nothing but colored water, a priest's desperate attempt to offer hope where none exists. But then the world begins to change. It starts as a tingling in her fingertips, a strange lightness in her head, as if she's had too much wine at dinner. The room seems to shift and blur around the edges, the familiar furniture becoming vague and dreamlike. Her heartbeat, usually as steady as Big Ben's chimes, begins to slow and falter, each beat requiring tremendous effort, like climbing stairs that grow steeper with each step. Juliet stumbles toward her bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. The wedding dress hanging from the wardrobe door seems to watch her with empty sleeves, while the mirror reflects a face growing pale as morning mist. Cold spreads through her body like winter fog, starting at her extremities and flowing toward her heart with inexorable certainty. Romeo, she gasps, his name barely audible as her breath grows shallow. Find me. Save me. Remember that I loved you enough to risk everything. The vial slips from her fingers and shatters on the hardwood floor, its crystal fragments catching the lamplight like fallen tears. Juliet collapses onto her bed, her body settling into the perfect stillness of apparent death. While somewhere in London, church clocks chime midnight, marking the end of Wednesday and the beginning of the most tragic Thursday in the long history of star-crossed love. Morning light streams through her bedroom windows with cruel indifference, illuminating a scene that will shatter her family's world. The nurse discovers her just after 7 o'clock, entering with breakfast and morning greetings that die in her throat when she sees the still form on the bed. Lady Juliet? The nurse calls softly, then louder when no response comes. Child, wake up! Your wedding day has arrived. But Juliet lies motionless as carved marble, her skin pale as winter snow, her lips blue as forget-me-nots. No breath disturbs her chest, no pulse beats in her wrist, no warmth remains in fingers that had been warm with life just hours before. The nurse's scream echoes through the Capulet mansion like the cry of a banshee, bringing servants running and parents stumbling from their beds in nightgowns and hastily donned robes. Lady Capulet takes one look at her daughter's still form and crumples to the floor in a faint that speaks of a mother's heart breaking beyond repair. She's dead, Lord Capulet says, his voice hollow as an empty church. Our daughter, our beautiful Juliet, is dead. The house that had been preparing for a wedding transforms instantly into a house of mourning. The cream silk dress is replaced by burial clothes, white flowers become funeral wreaths, and wedding bells give way to the tolling of death knells. Count Paris arrives expecting to claim his bride, and instead finds a household destroyed by grief, his wedding feast becoming a funeral banquet, his marriage bed becoming a tomb. But in her artificial death, Juliet dreams of Romeo's return, of Father Mackenzie's plan unfolding perfectly, of awakening in her beloved's arms to begin a new life free from family feuds and forced marriages. She cannot know that her desperate gamble has already set in motion a chain of events that will test whether love truly can conquer death, or whether some prices are simply too high for even the most passionate hearts to pay. London mourns another young life lost to the violence and chaos of modern times. While somewhere in the city's vast expanse, a message travels toward Romeo's exile, carrying news that will bring him racing back to reclaim what he believes is his living bride, not knowing that fate and miscommunication are already weaving the final threads of their star-crossed tapestry. The news travels through London's communication networks, like poison through bloodstream, carried by telephone wires and whispered conversations, spreading from Mayfair's Georgian mansions to Chelsea's bohemian coffeehouses with the inexorable speed of tragedy. But like all tragic news, it becomes distorted in its telling. Essential details lost while devastating headlines remain. Romeo receives the news in a cramped bedsit above a fish and chip shop in Brighton, where the salt air from the English Channel mingles with the scent of frying cod and the endless cry of seagulls. His exile has transformed him into a shadow of his former self. His mod clothing replaced by working-class denims, his confident swagger reduced to the careful movements of a man trying to remain invisible. He works odd jobs along the coast, loading boxes at the docks, cleaning dishes in seaside cafes, anything that pays cash and asks no questions about family names or London troubles. The telephone call comes to the shop downstairs, and Mrs. Henderson, the elderly proprietor with flour permanently embedded under her fingernails, climbs the narrow stairs with reluctance heavy as lead in her steps. Romeo knows before she speaks that the news will shatter what little peace he's managed to construct in this seaside exile. "Romeo, love," she says, her Yorkshire accent thick with sympathy. "There's been a call from London, from someone called Benvolio," he says. "He says you need to know that Juliet Capulet is dead." The words hit Romeo like physical blows, each syllable driving him deeper into a darkness that seems to swallow all light, all hope, all reason. Dead. Juliet. The two words cannot possibly belong in the same sentence, yet here they are, carried by telephone wires and spoken with the awful finality of absolute truth. "Dead?" Romeo repeats, the word foreign on his tongue. "No, there's been a mistake. Juliet can't be. She was alive when I left London. Beautiful, breathing, warm. She can't be." But Mrs. Henderson's weathered face tells him that denial will not resurrect the dead, that some truths are too terrible to be anything but real. Romeo sinks onto his narrow bed, the bedsit's walls suddenly pressing in like a coffin, while outside Brighton's pier stretches into gray water under grayer skies. What Romeo doesn't know, cannot know, because fate delights in cruel timing, is that Father Mackenzie's letter explaining the sleeping potion plan sits in a London postal sorting office, delayed by a workers' strike that has paralyzed mail delivery for 3 days. The message that would save them both travels through the system at the pace of bureaucratic indifference, while tragedy races ahead with the speed of a sports car on the M1. Within an hour, Romeo has packed his few possessions and caught the next train to London, his ticket purchased with the last of his exile wages. The journey becomes a nightmare of stopped time and racing thoughts, the countryside rolling past the train windows like a film reel of his former life. Every mile brings him closer to a London that no longer contains Juliet's laughter, every station platform a reminder of all the places they will never visit together. The train pulls into Victoria Station just as afternoon light begins to fade, London's eternal fog wrapping around the iron and glass cathedral of the railway terminus like a shroud. Romeo moves through the crowds of commuters and tourists, with the focused intensity of a man with only one purpose remaining in life: to see Juliet one more time, to say goodbye to the love that had made everything possible, and now makes nothing bearable. But first, he needs to acquire the means to join her in whatever realm lies beyond breathing and heartbeat. The London of 1966 offers many paths to chemical oblivion, and Romeo knows the streets well enough to find what he's looking for. In a Soho alley that smells of foreign spices and desperate dreams, he meets a man whose expensive suit cannot hide the pallor of someone who traffics in pharmaceutical desperation. "Barbiturates," Romeo says simply, the transaction requiring no elaborate explanation, enough to ensure permanent sleep. The dealer, a thin man with nervous eyes who goes by the name of Constantine, studies Romeo with the professional assessment of someone who has seen too many young faces seeking final solutions to temporary problems. "You sure about this, mate? There are other ways to handle whatever's got you down. Bird trouble, is it? Family problems? Nothing that can't be sorted with time and perspective. But Romeo's face carries the hollow certainty of someone who has already died inside, who seeks only to make the external match the internal reality. Money changes hands with the same matter-of-fact efficiency as buying a newspaper, and Constantine provides a small bottle of white pills that promise the same oblivion that death's door traditionally requires. "These'll do it," Constantine warns, his voice carrying the weight of professional responsibility that comes with dealing in final solutions. "But once you take 'em, there's no going back. No last-minute reprieve, no waking up with a hangover and a second chance. You understand?" Romeo nods, pocketing the bottle with the same care he once reserved for Juliet's letters, then disappears back into London's labyrinthine streets, as fog begins to roll in from the Thames. The city that had once seemed full of infinite possibility now appears as a maze of gray stone and darker shadows, every familiar landmark a reminder of shared moments that will never come again. Meanwhile, in the Capulet family crypt beneath St. Bartholomew's Church, Juliet lies in artificial death's embrace, her body arranged on a marble slab with the same ceremonial care reserved for medieval saints. Candles flicker in the underground chamber, their warm light dancing across stone walls carved with the names and dates of Capulets who have slept here for centuries. White lilies, her mother's favorite flowers, surround her still form like fallen snow, while above ground, London's traffic continues its eternal circulation, unaware that love's greatest test unfolds in the silence below. The sleeping potion continues its work with chemical precision, slowing Juliet's metabolism to barely detectable levels while maintaining the spark of life that waits for the right moment to reignite. Her dreams, if the state she occupies can be called dreaming, are filled with memories of Romeo's voice, his touch, the way sunlight caught in his dark hair on their wedding morning. But she cannot know that her beloved races, through London's streets, toward what he believes is her tomb, carrying in his pocket the means to join her in what he thinks is death. She cannot know that Father Mackenzie's letter explaining the truth sits undelivered, or that the plan meant to save them both has become the instrument of their destruction. Romeo reaches St. Bartholomew's just as evening service ends, the last of the congregation filing out into fog-wrapped streets, while church bells chime 7 o'clock. The Gothic spires disappear into low clouds like fingers reaching toward heaven, and stained glass windows glow with warm light that promises sanctuary and peace. But Romeo seeks neither, only the darkness below, where his wife waits in what he believes is eternal sleep. The crypt's heavy wooden door stands slightly ajar, as if fate itself has smoothed his path to this final reunion. Romeo descends stone steps worn smooth by centuries of mourners, his footsteps echoing in the underground chamber like a heartbeat counting down final moments. The candles flicker as he enters, their light revealing Juliet's form arranged in perfect repose, beautiful as carved marble and just as cold to his desperate touch. "Juliet," he whispers, her name a prayer in the sacred darkness. "My love, my life, my wife. Death may have claimed you, but it cannot touch what we had together. If I cannot live with you, then I will die with you, and perhaps in death we'll find the peace that life denied us." The bottle of barbiturates rests heavy in his palm as Romeo settles beside Juliet's still form, while above them London continues its eternal dance, unaware that the greatest love story of the swinging 60s approaches its final terrible crescendo. The crypt's candlelight flickers across Romeo's face as he kneels beside Juliet's marble resting place, transforming his features into a study of grief so profound it seems to sculpt new lines around his eyes, new hollows in his cheeks. The underground chamber, carved from London stone centuries before the Beatles wrote their first song, becomes witness to love's final desperate act. "Death that hath sucked the honey of thy breath," Romeo whispers, his voice echoing off ancient walls where generations of Capulets sleep in genuine eternal rest, "hath had no power yet upon thy beauty." His fingers trace the curve of Juliet's cheek, still warm to his touch, though he cannot feel the faint pulse that beats beneath skin pale as winter moonlight. The barbiturates rest in his palm like white seeds of oblivion, each pill a doorway to whatever realm exists beyond breathing and heartbeat. Around them, the candles dance in drafts that seep through the old church foundations, their flames casting moving shadows that seem to breathe life into carved stone angels and marble saints. Here will I remain," Romeo continues, his voice growing stronger as his decision becomes absolute. "With worms that are thy chambermaids. Eyes look your last. Arms, take your last embrace. And lips. Oh, you the doors of breath. Seal with a righteous kiss. A dateless bargain to engrossing death. He kisses her still lips with the tenderness of a bridegroom, tasting the faint sweetness that lingers from the sleeping potion, though he mistakes it for death's own honey. The kiss becomes their second wedding ceremony, performed in a cathedral of stone and shadows where only God and the dead bear witness to love's ultimate sacrifice. The pills go down easily with water from a flask he's carried since Brighton, their bitter taste seeming appropriate for life's final medicine. Romeo settles beside Juliet on the marble slab, taking her cold hand in his, their wedding rings clicking together with the sound of promises kept even unto death. Thus with a kiss, I die, he whispers, and closes his eyes as the barbiturates begin their swift, merciful work. Above them, London's evening settles into night, while Big Ben chimes 8 o'clock across a city unaware that its greatest love story approaches its final tragic note. Traffic flows through streets where Romeo and Juliet once walked hand in hand, while in pubs and coffee houses, young people debate the future of music, fashion, and love, never knowing that in a crypt beneath their feet, love writes its own epitaph in blood and sorrow. Romeo's breathing grows shallow, then stops altogether. His hand, still clasping Juliet's, grows cold as marble, while his face settles into the peaceful expression of someone who has found release from unbearable pain. Death claims him gently, as if recognizing that he has suffered enough in his brief life to deserve a quiet passage to whatever lies beyond. But fate, that cruel playwright who delights in timing's cruel precision, has one final twist to write. As Romeo's heart beats its last, the sleeping potion reaches the end of its chemical effectiveness, and Juliet's body begins the slow process of awakening from artificial death. The change starts subtly, a flutter of eyelids, a barely perceptible warming of skin, the faint return of breath so shallow it would fool any casual observer. Her dreams, filled with images of Romeo's return, begin to merge with returning consciousness, as the potion's grip loosens like morning fog before sunrise. Juliet's eyes open to candle-lit darkness and the scent of lilies mixed with something else, something sharp and chemical that speaks of medicines and desperate choices. Her first sensation is confusion, her mind struggling to piece together fragments of memory. Her parents' ultimatum, Father Mackenzie's plan, the bitter taste of the sleeping draught, the cold embrace of artificial death. Romeo, she calls softly, her voice rusty from hours of silence. Romeo, are you here? Has Father Mackenzie's plan worked? She sits up slowly, her body stiff from lying motionless, and turns to find Romeo beside her on the marble slab. Joy floods her heart as she sees him there, apparently sleeping, his dark hair fallen across his forehead in the way that always made her want to brush it back with gentle fingers. My love, she whispers, reaching out to wake him with a touch. We're free. The plan worked perfectly. My family thinks me dead, and now we can leave London together, start fresh somewhere they'll never find us. But Romeo's skin feels wrong beneath her touch, too cold, too still, lacking the warmth and subtle movement that should accompany even the deepest sleep. Panic begins to rise in her throat as she shakes his shoulder gently, then more urgently, calling his name with increasing desperation. Romeo, wake up. Please wake up. This isn't part of the plan. You're supposed to be here to rescue me, not to. Her voice dies as she sees the empty pill bottle fallen from his lifeless hand, its label bearing the unmistakable mark of professional pharmaceutical death. The terrible truth crashes over her like Thames water at flood tide. Romeo has killed himself believing her truly dead, choosing to join her in what he thought was eternal sleep. No, she breathes, the word escaping like air from punctured lungs. No, no, no. You were supposed to know. Father Mackenzie was supposed to tell you. The letter was supposed to reach you. She cradles his head against her chest, feeling for any sign of life. Any flutter of pulse that might indicate hope remains. But Romeo's body holds only the stillness of genuine death, his face peaceful in a way that speaks of suffering ended rather than love fulfilled. Above them, footsteps echo on the church floor as Father Mackenzie arrives for his evening rounds, his heart heavy with worry about the letter that never reached Romeo, the plan that has gone so terribly wrong. Behind him come voices. Lord and Lady Capulet, come to mourn their daughter, followed by the Montagues, drawn by Benvolio's desperate message about Romeo's return to London. Oh God, Juliet whispers, understanding that discovery comes too late to matter. that the families who would have opposed their love will now witness its tragic conclusion. We were so close to freedom, to happiness, to a life together. She looks around the crypt, seeing her surroundings clearly for the first time since awakening. The candles still burn, casting the same warm light that illuminated their secret wedding ceremony. The flowers still perfume the air with the scent of life and beauty. Everything remains exactly as it was, except that love itself lies dead in her arms. The sound of approaching voices grows louder, echoing down the stone steps that lead to this chamber of final reunion. Soon the families will arrive to find not just one body but two. Not just death, but the completion of love's most desperate gamble. Juliet reaches for Romeo's dagger, still tucked in his jacket pocket. A switchblade that gleams like liquid silver in the candlelight. The blade that has taken so much life will now complete the circle, allowing love to triumph over separation even if it cannot triumph over death itself. "Romeo," she whispers against his still lips, "I'll not be long behind you. If we cannot live together, then we'll die together. And perhaps in death find the peace that life denied us." The dagger finds its mark, with the same precision that has guided every choice in this tragic tale. And as Juliet's life flows out to mingle with Romeo's stillness, London's greatest love story reaches its inevitable, heartbreaking conclusion. Above them, the church bells begin to toll, calling London to witness what happens when ancient hatred proves stronger than young love. When miscommunication destroys what understanding might have saved. When the very passion that makes life worth living becomes the force that ends it entirely. The sound of footsteps on stone echoes through Street Bartholomew's ancient corridors like the approaching drumbeat of judgment itself. Father Mackenzie descends first, his weathered hands trembling as he carries a candle to supplement the flickering light already dancing in the crypt. Behind him, two families who have spent years perfecting the art of hatred now walk together, united only by grief and the terrible symmetry of loss. Lord and Lady Capulet move like sleepwalkers through their own nightmare. She clutching black pearls that have witnessed generations of family sorrows, he leaning heavily on a walking stick he's never needed before this week. The Montagues follow close behind. Lord Montague's fashionable sideburns now streaked with premature gray, Lady Montague's mauve dress replaced by widow's weeds that speak of a mother's heart already broken by her son's exile. The crypt's heavy wooden door swings open with a creak that seems to echo through centuries, and what they find there transforms grief into something beyond human language to express. Two young bodies lie intertwined on the marble slab like carved figures from a medieval tomb. Romeo's dark suit complementing Juliet's white burial dress, their hands clasped together with wedding rings that catch candlelight like captured stars. "Merciful God," Lord Capulet breathes, his voice barely audible in the stone chamber. "What is this? Why does the Montague boy lie beside our daughter?" Lady Capulet approaches the marble slab with steps that seem to carry the weight of all her years, her eyes taking in details that make no sense according to the laws of family hatred and social propriety. Romeo's face, peaceful in death, shows no signs of violence, while Juliet, her Juliet, who should be cold and still, bears fresh wounds that speak of choices made in desperation. "She was dead," Lady Capulet whispers, her fingers hovering over her daughter's still warm skin. "We found her dead yesterday morning. The physician confirmed it. How can she bleed anew?" Father Mackenzie steps forward into the candlelight, his face bearing the terrible burden of truth that arrives too late to save anyone. In his hand, he carries a letter addressed to Romeo, its envelope bearing the postal stamps that mark its journey through London's delayed mail system. A journey that took 3 days too long and cost 2 lives too many. "My lord, my lady," the priest begins, his voice heavy with the weight of confession and complicity. "What you see here is love's greatest triumph and tragedy combined. These young people were married, by my hand, in my chapel, 3 days ago." The words hit both families like physical blows, each syllable reshaping everything they thought they knew about their children, their feud, their carefully constructed world of us and them. Married, Romeo and Juliet, Montague and Capulet. The impossible made real, the forbidden made sacred, the hatred made irrelevant by love's simple vows. Married, Lord Montague steps closer to the marble slab, seeing his son's face clearly for the first time since the boy fled London in exile. "Romeo married a Capulet, our enemy's daughter?" Father Mackenzie nods gravely. Unfolding the letter that might have prevented this tragedy, if London's postal workers hadn't chosen this week to strike for better wages. Romeo thought Juliet truly dead. He could not know that her death was false, a sleeping potion designed to free her from a marriage she could not accept while already bound by sacred vows to your son. The explanation unfolds in the candlelit crypt like a play performed for an audience of the dead, each revelation adding new weight to the terrible mathematics of miscommunication and missed chances. The parents learn of secret meetings and desperate plans, of love that defied every obstacle except the cruelest enemy of all, time itself, and the failure of messages to arrive when hope still lived. Lady Montague reaches across the space that has separated the families for so many years, her hand finding Lady Capulets as both women face the universal pain that transcends all social boundaries, the loss of children who die before their parents, who choose death over life without love. They loved each other, Lady Montague says simply, her voice carrying no trace of the anger that has defined her relationship with the Capulets for years. Despite everything we taught them about hatred, about family loyalty, about the importance of choosing the right side, they chose love instead. The two mothers stand together beside the marble slab where their children lie in eternal embrace, while around them, the crypt's stone walls bear witness to a moment of understanding that arrives too late to matter for the dead, but might still matter for the living. Lord Capulet examines the empty pill bottle that fell from Romeo's hand, its pharmaceutical label stark evidence of desperate choices made in ignorance of alternatives. He killed himself believing her dead. She woke to find him gone, and chose to join him rather than live without him. They were children, Lord Montague says, his voice breaking with the weight of parental failure. We taught them hatred when we should have taught them wisdom. We fed them stories of family honor when we should have shown them the value of human love. Above them, London continues its eternal dance. Buses rumble through streets where Romeo and Juliet once walked hand in hand. Radio plays the Beatles songs about love conquering all. And young couples meet in coffeehouses and fall in love despite their families' expectations. But in this underground chamber, the city's greatest love story has written its final chapter in blood and sorrow. Father Mackenzie performs the last rites over both bodies, his Latin phrases echoing off stone walls that have absorbed centuries of human grief and joy, while the two families stand united for the first time in memory, not by celebration, but by the shared recognition of what their ancient hatred has cost them. We must end this, Lord Capulet declares, his voice carrying the authority of absolute decision. The feud between our houses dies here, in this crypt, with these children who loved each other more than they hated our rivalry. The handshake between the two patriarchs takes place over the bodies of their children, a seal on peace purchased with the highest possible price. Their wives embrace beside the marble slab, tears falling on stone worn smooth by centuries of similar sorrows, while London's fog begins to lift outside as if even the weather recognizes that something fundamental has changed. In the days that follow, London mourns not just two young lives lost to violence and miscommunication, but the recognition that love, real love, the kind that inspires songs and changes hearts, sometimes requires sacrifices that society is too rigid to prevent. The story spreads through the city's networks of gossip and grief. The Montague boy and Capulet girl who loved each other enough to die for it, whose secret marriage revealed the emptiness of family feuds in the face of human connection. The funeral becomes a celebration of love, rather than a lament for hatred's victims. Young people gather outside street Bartholomew's church wearing flowers in their hair and carrying signs reading, "Love conquers all," and "Make love, not war." Slogans that capture the spirit of the 60s, while mourning two hearts that beat too briefly to see their ideals become reality. Years later, as London transforms from the swinging 60s into the questioning 70s, the story of Romeo and Juliet Montague becomes legend. A reminder that love's power lies not in its ability to guarantee happy endings, but in its capacity to change hearts, heal wounds, and inspire others to choose connection over division, understanding over hatred, hope over despair. The Montague and Capulet families, forever linked by marriage and tragedy, work together to establish a foundation supporting young lovers whose families oppose their unions. Their children's death becomes the seed of life for others, their sacrifice the foundation of healing that prevents future tragedies born from ancient prejudices. And sometimes, on foggy London nights when Big Ben chimes midnight across the Thames, lovers walking hand in hand through the city's ancient streets remember Romeo and Juliet, Two young people who proved that love, even when it ends in death, remains stronger than the hatred that seeks to destroy it. Their story echoes through London's eternal dance of tradition and change, a reminder that some truths transcend time, fashion, and the temporary divisions that seem so important to each generation, but fade like morning mist before the unchanging power of the human heart. In death, they achieved what life denied them: the freedom to love without limit, to choose connection over conflict, to prove that some bonds are stronger than family names, social expectations, or the fear that keeps most hearts safely guarded against the beautiful, dangerous possibility of loving someone completely, regardless of the cost. Their London sleeps peacefully now, forever changed by love that burned bright enough to light the way for others, even as it consumed itself in the burning.